I'm Alexandria Kenyon, spiritual mentor and your host of Conscious Connection, a podcast where we create space for humanness within spiritual development. Me and my When She Feels Like It co-host, Kimber Klein, are giving you a real behind-the-scenes look of what it is actually like to be on a spiritual development path. We will talk with coaches, healers, and other spiritual leaders who are making impact, as well as our clients who will share their real-life experience as they practice owning their intuitive gifts. Stick around for unfiltered conversations that may or may not poke fun at New Age spirituality, giving you permission to show up imperfectly human. Hi guys, welcome to Conscious Connection episode 4. This is part 2 of our conversation with Brandon Wilcox, who is a spiritual teacher, healer, and guide. I hope you enjoyed our last episode. I thought it was really, really insightful. If you haven't gotten a chance to tune into that, you might want to tune in first before you begin this journey. In this episode, Brandon and I are talking about men in healing spaces, teaching from embodied wisdom, and I'm asking Brandon, what is karma? We hear that word all the time, but what does it mean? And what does it mean from a perspective of someone who sees energy? Just a little reminder that Brandon's healing program, Align and Heal, started yesterday, but don't worry. You can join up to 4 weeks in. You can use our special link in the show notes if you're wanting to learn some psychic tools. Brandon teaches at my intuitive training program. And I will say that these tools have changed my life as a sensitive being. So if you're curious, go to his website. We'll link it in the show notes. But you can still join Align and Heal. And as somebody who is training their intuitive gifts, I will say that it will quantum leap your life. So without further ado, because what else could I even say to transition into this conversation? Brandon and I having a conversation about collective energies. Let's go.
Something we were kind of discussing before coming on was, I helped teach a group of what we had like 90 people in the first level, and there was maybe like 8 guys out of that 90. And now it's maybe 30 people and 4 guys or something like that. And we noticed that all over the place with spirituality, with tantra, with, emotional work, with content creators, all sorts of stuff. And I'm curious why you think that is and how we can get the men more involved.
Why do I think that is? I feel that masculine energy is going through a really big growth period right now on being able to feel their feelings in their bodies. And I find that, like there's a lot more permission for women to be in healing spaces. And I see it. I live in Asheville. So there's a lot more havingness here for men to be spiritual or healing or growing in that way or developing. But there's still this layer of like resistance that's in that space. It's almost like, can I show up and be vulnerable? So I'm not quite sure what's going on with men right now. I would like them to come on over, and I find that, being in a female body, it's like quite difficult to like find a partner, because it's like, oh, okay, like there's not a lot of men in the dating pool where like there's an actual energy match. And so I don't know what men are doing. I can't really speak to them, the men that I date or the men that I are in my life as friends, there's fear. It's fear. I don't know what it is. It's like I can't ask for help. I don't deserve, or I'm not worthy of support in this way. Whereas I find that women, um, there's just a different level of havingness there. It's like, okay, like I can receive support. Um,
So really,
yeah.
sounds like what you're saying is it's a lot of it comes down to conditioning, and that men are
Mhm.
conditioned to be a certain way in the world, and they're conditioned to not be as in touch with their feelings and to not ask for help and to not have that room to do something that's maybe for themselves and their own growth. They're maybe more conditioned to be a provider and to be macho and to shut off to that, because that spiritual energy is often seen as a feminine one, even
Mhm.
though that's not entirely the case. You know, it has aspects of feminine and masculine within the spiritual path in a lot of different ways, but it can also oftentimes feel like a more feminine energy, and women can be a little bit more natural at it. That, you know, there's that old saying of women's intuition, of women always know. And so there's
Mhm.
something, you know, going on maybe even at a body level, where that's easier for women to tap into. But a conditioning level is kind of what it sounds like you think the biggest causes.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I feel like when I read the energy that there's a shift happening. There's definitely a shift. I see a lot of men going through intense growth right now. Intense growth. So I feel like, you know, in the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot of men um, in these spaces. And I'm excited about it. I'm like, come on, let's go. It's going to be
Hmm.
fun. We're all sensitive. Come on. Um, but yeah, I would love to see that. It would be great. Let's do it. So many
Yeah.
men, like just being in the dating scene is hilarious to me because men will meet me and they're like, "Wow, like I can talk to you," or like, "This is the deepest conversation I've ever had." I'm like, "Yes, I know." Um, I know, but it's okay. Like, I'm like, wow. And they'll ask me questions. I'm like, wow, here's this training program that would be really supportive for you if you're
Mhm.
interested, or here's how I can like connect you. Do you know any men? I'm like, go see Brandon, please. I'm literally like, just just go do it. Um, I did have a partner once though who did have a reading with my mentor Olivia, and it was so interesting. Like he was definitely open, but there's still a fear. Yeah, there's still a fear of what I guess. Yeah, conditioning around what does that mean for me and my identity as a masculine being
Mm.
if I'm going to heal or grow in these ways. Um, yeah,
You want me to say something that may come off a little jaded?
I'm ready.
I wonder if part of it is that it is such a women dominated space that men don't feel like they can be empowered in it, and
Mm.
that they have life experiences where they felt either demasculated or like they weren't as capable or strong as smart as women, in that it's sort of their playing ground. If men are good at going from point A to point B, being really directive and systematic, and the feminine energy is more of a flow, more open-ended, more receptive, that has to do more with your intuition, that receiving an image. You're not going after what you're looking for. You're not going after healing. You're receiving what needs to come in. So I wonder if some of the push away for men is that they don't want to feel controlled or manipulated. And I speak from a place of, I'll sometimes have women who buy readings for their partners, for their husbands, boyfriends, whatever. And the first energy that I oftentimes see with the guys coming in is, oh, she hired you so you can tell me how what I'm doing is wrong and how I'm not living up to her expectations and needs. And they're all afraid that I'm going to be really one-sided with the reading, which is never the case. But I wonder if that also translates to them feeling comfortable coming into training programs, to embarking on their own personal and self-growth. And to the contrary, I wonder if some guys are only in it because they're into the women.
Yeah.
There could be
Yeah.
just as much of that
It
as
makes a lot
well.
of sense. Like the women initiating, it's like, hey, just get into this space. Like this is going to help us heal and grow. But it's got to be a personal choice in order for it to really be um, effective. Like you're going to get what you give to it. I mean, I know I'm on a very spiritual path in this lifetime and I show up in that. And so it's like, yeah, it kind of comes back to the idea of intention. Like if you're like, you know, I've invited partners to, of course, like come into this space because I find this space really valuable to me. Um, because it resonates with me. And, it doesn't mean that it has to resonate with my partner. But I would like it to. But
Yeah.
it's,
I wonder if men in that instance feel as if uh, they need to be fixed, as if their girlfriends
oh,
want them to be better, and if there's a wound there that makes that kind of bittersweet for them.
I could see that definitely.
I think it's definitely case by case. I've had some students that came in as couples,
Mm.
where a girlfriend and boyfriend came in, and there was definitely a feeling of the boyfriend got dragged in here, and that he was doing it to make her happy. But it wasn't necessarily him being fixed. It was more of a, my girlfriend wants to do this, and she wants me to support her in doing this and do it with her. And so there was a sense of him feeling almost empowered because he's like, oh yeah, I'm protecting you in this space. I'm a body here for you so you can have this training for yourself. I've seen that happen
Mm.
as well. Yeah, but I love what you said about it. It has to be for them. They have to actually want it for themselves and be doing it for them, not doing it to make someone happy. I've played into that mistake of uh, being a psychic and a teacher and having relationships where I'm like, you need to come get training. That way we can speak the same language. And
Psychonese. I'm like, we need
yeah,
to be able to communicate.
uh-huh. And it was always a flop if I wanted it for them and they didn't
Yeah.
want it for themselves. So it's not a gender specific thing. It can happen the other way
Yeah.
around just as easily. Whereas like my current partner, she very much wanted it for herself. She was very like lost and in pain and saw that it worked for me, and so she wanted it for herself. And so for her, it's worked a lot better versus somebody where it's like, oh, I think you need this for yourself, but you
Yeah.
don't realize it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I
But
would.
that's so tricky because that's a big part of the spiritual journey, is realizing that everybody needs this, and people don't realize they need it, and they're holding themselves back from this whole other amazing life and experience that they could have. So it's
Yeah.
like, how do you help somebody see what's best for them, what their next step is?
I just sprinkle it in and try to create neutrality of like, hey, this could be really supportive. Here it is. Like do your own research, like make your own decision. I want people to feel empowered, of course, in their own choice. We can't force anyone to do anything. Um, yeah, I want to speak to this. Before Energy Matters, before working with Olivia, was that psychic reader who was working with entities to get my information. So like speaking to it, that's why I like have a lot of amusement around it because I'm like, oh, baby me, working with entities. Wow, cute. She has all her answers, but they're just like so clairaudient, like a being like
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, oh wow, okay, I got a lot of things correct, but for what? Like, what's the intention? Where's the neutrality? And so coming into Energy Matters, I'm like, wow, okay, this is a really big shift for me. I want everyone to experience it because I'm like, this has changed my life. Um, like, and I want to speak to, yeah, like being able to speak the same language is, it's very refreshing, I think, for us because like we're sensitive beings. It's just my roommate and my best friend and like a soul partner in a lot of ways. Like we speak the language. It's easier. Does that
Yeah.
mean that it's everyone's journey? No. Do I want everyone to do it? Yes. Just do it. Um, but yeah, I can see how it definitely needs to be like your soul's choice and decision. And yeah, maybe some people are just not going to do that in this lifetime. And I've had to become neutral to that as well. um, I'm highly motivated in this life and ambitious. So I'm like, let's go. I'm like training, training, training. But it's a commitment. And I think that that's what people are afraid of, because ultimately, once you cross over that threshold, like, this is my life now. Running my energy, meditating. This is my life. This
Hmm.
is what I do because it feels good, and it's not necessarily like a obligation anymore. It just feels good. It's like, okay, this is what I do. This is how I shift my energy. This is how I am able to see. Um, so would like to get, just calling it back, love to get more men out here. Like, would love that. That would be great. It would really, really balance these spaces. But I can also understand, like, you speaking into maybe the resistance of feeling like in some way that they're invalidated, or that they don't, there's not space for them to be there and to be open and to be vulnerable.
And it's interesting because who needs this work more than men in a sense? Like, what do men go and do? You know, they get home from a hard day of work and they pop open a beer, they go golfing, they do some sort of activity that helps them to flush out the energy of their day, or to suppress those emotions that they're feeling, because they're not, you know, supposed to be being sensitive, and they need their man time, their alone time, in order to feel recharged in
Start
like
laughing at man time.
man time. Let's have some man time.
What is man time?
Psychic man time.
I mean, that's a man time.
I guess that sounds kind of dirty too, depending on how you take it.
It's literally like man time.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna have my man
But
time. Yeah, I
so
love it.
them having energy tools to be able to do those things would be really helpful, to be able to release that energy, to be able to let go of their day, to be able to dissipate that stress, um, would be huge. So yeah, let's call them forth. Let's
I'm
bring more guys
so
in.
curious too. Like, what is your experience being one of the five male people in these spaces that are just, it's, yeah, dominantly women? What is your experience like?
It's a trip because on one hand, I've always been around women. I didn't really have a lot of guy friends growing up because the two guy friends I had early on in middle school were just horrible to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I really mostly hung out with girls and got along with them a lot better. And then when I went to psychic school, I was, you know, a 16-year-old guy with a group of, you know, 40, 50-year-old women only, the only teenager at the time and the only guy there at the time. And even by the time I was a teacher, there was only a handful of guys. And yeah, I do readings for this women's tantra group, and so most of my clients are women, almost all of them, just around women all the time. And I didn't notice that there was an issue with it at first because it was kind of what I was used to.
Mm-hmm.
But then recently getting to teach at Energy Matters and work with other guys like Cody and David and Jason and Kale and all that, I'm like, oh my God, I was missing out on so much. There's a different way that they convey information and a different way that our bodies work that is so validating to have from a male bodied person, that I didn't get before. And it was interesting because even my female first teacher, at one point she said to me, at some point you're going to need a male teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I thought that that was interesting. And it's been such a huge improvement on my integrating everything that I know and being able to teach in a whole new style. Teaching after, you know, working with other men versus teaching while working with female, it's night and day difference. If you saw recordings of me before versus now, it's like it's actually feels like it's genuine to me and it's coming from me, and you can just tell how much more integration there is. So there's something that's missing there for sure that I didn't even totally realize until much later on in the journey.
Yeah, definitely. I feel the same way with Energy Matters is really, really cool for me because I've been primarily taught by women. And so it's been really cool to get the masculine perspective. It feels very structured. I love it. But also not. It's both and. But it's been really, really cool to learn these tools from men. I didn't even know if that was going to be available. And then I was like, whoa, like I had to, kind of create, I would say I had to move some energy around learning from men.
Hmm.
It's been interesting.
Different language in a sense.
Yeah, and I've really been enjoying it because I believe we have masculine and feminine energy flowing through us.
Yeah.
Like I'm in a female body. I have different creative energy in a sense.
Yeah.
Um, I'm really curious about this. I've been meaning to ask you about this. Do you feel when you're in these women's spaces that a lot of women throw energy at you because you're the only masculine energy in these spaces?
Well, there's a lot I could
Yeah.
say about that. For one, I was quite young when I first started, and so I was a little bit safe in that. That the energy being thrown at me was more like women wanting to be my mom.
Mm,
As I got older and started doing that, I can say I've had a handful of experience of women mistaking the loving energy that comes from holding support for them and being there to teach them and help them through a really intimate part of their life, their spiritual growth, and the intimacy of reading sometimes too, really seeing them for who they are, maybe for the first time for them. They've mistaken that for there being a romantic connection or some sort of love there and have thrown energy in that way. Some women will throw energy based off of their own wounds with other men.
mm,
I've seen some of that. Even my own first psychic teacher, she had her own unresolved problems with men in her life that she was sort of projecting onto me and taking out on me a little bit. And so I have noticed that. Yeah.
yeah. I imagine that would be challenging in a lot of ways because like women are like, wait, there's like four men here. Like, that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of
definitely.
like stories and a lot of energy um, based on that. So, yeah, I can understand that deeply. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like especially in the way that people show up online, males versus females are they show up and communicate in very different ways, and how they
Mm-hmm.
present themselves and how they attract things to them. And something I think it was a client said to me the other day was that ever since 2020, it seems like everyone is a psychic or a medium or a spiritual mentor, or have some sort of coaching business. And there's been a huge rise in popularity and an expression of it sort of coming out into the world more and more since then. And I'm just curious if you have any thoughts around that.
I have a lot of thoughts about it. I'm like,
Yeah.
we're seeing this collective energy of psychic awakening happening, and people are jumping into that, myself included, um, without any frame. And without a level of frame or training, there is a lot more margin for error and potential to cause people pain or to, with having this sensitivity, there's got to be a level of discernment. So as I'm seeing everyone having a psychic awakening, what my training has taught me, I mean, the other day my friend was like, here's this program, like it really changed my life. And it did. I saw it helped her grow. It was very validating for her. And I was like, the person was channeling, like trance channeling. And I was like, I was like, what are they? She's like, yeah, like listen to the opening channel. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. So yeah, people are opening their channels, right? Like I see this process of like this crown activation, and people opening up this channel and not grounding, not attuning to the lower chakras. Um, and this is who who, I'm kind of here to help, is those people who went through the experience like I did, blasted open by some kind of traumatic experience. Like lower chakras need to be cleared, cleansed, pictures everywhere. Like crown is just going off, like, and it becomes quite debilitating. But yeah, I see this pseudo spirituality. That's what I'll
Mm,
say. It's pseudo. I think I
mm,
had a friend tell me this once. He was like, mushrooms are so cool. There's like, it's either mushrooms or he was like talking about a certain plant. And he's like, they're pseudo plants that'll come and try to match the the essence of it, but it's not the essence of it. Um, I can understand how we as a collective want to open and experience things and be validated for the experiences that were invalidated from us being children. We're spiritual beings. Um, and I also understand that it gets a lot of attention because it's the cool thing to do right now. And I feel like spirituality is difficult. Okay, maybe not difficult. It's
it's
if
not
you,
easy.
it's not easy. It's like if I like when I remember when I was like activating, my mentor at the time was like, you have to ask for these gifts to open. Like you have to kind of give yourself permission. And I was like, I want this. And I was like, if myself now could like inform of the journey that was about to go down, most people wouldn't want it. Like,
Yeah.
because it is so intense. It is looking at yourself is the most intense thing. Looking at your pain, processing your pain, turning inward, disconnecting from whatever's happening in the collective, um, being able to live grounded in a society that has all of these systems and also not be controlled. A fun paradox. I live for it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You have to want it. You have to have this like sense of will. So yeah, I think there's a lot of, but it's also like everyone's on their own journey. Everyone's on their own path. Like if that's the way that they're gonna get there, I got there in that way. Like, okay, like I'm psychic now. Great. What do I do with that? I'm just gonna give readings, I guess. Which was impactful for me to validate my gifts, but like now the real growth, helping people grow is starting because I'm able to be neutral. So I'm
Hmm.
like,
Right.
what do you think about it? What do you think about, like, I'm dying to know, what do you see within this weird energy of like awakening happening, this like culture of spirituality that's being birthed? Like what do you see in that?
I think it's interesting because it's always been there. There's always been a new age movement of some kind. There's always been some new spiritual information that's coming through. There's always been channelers. Channelers have date back really far in history. There's always been psychics. It's all stuff that's been around since forever. It's nothing that's new. The newness is the popularity of it in sort of the mainstream and the exposure of it. And I think in 2020, people finally had their picture of reality and what it is challenged because suddenly there's a global pandemic and this picture that society puts out of everything safe and contained, the government's going to take care of you, you just do X, Y, and Z, and here's how you succeed. All of that got thrown out. You just can't full-heartedly believe that anymore through the pandemic. And so with that, all these other parts of their reality got challenged as well. They're like, okay, well, if that was a lie, what else is a lie? And with that, there's sort of a spiritual battle going on that's been happening again, kind of forever, but it's been intensified around that time. And so things have been amplified, right? Both the sort of the dark things and the light things. And there's been a mass uncovering of lies, is really what I see it as.
Mm,
Lots of things have been brought to the surface for us to do something about it. And some of them are really emotionally charged for people, like the whole Roe versus Wade court hearing thing. Everyone
mm,
sees that as this is absolute bad. And while I agree that the ruling is wrong, is it bad, or are we now able to have awareness of it? Are we now able to come together on this topic? Doctors are stepping out. moving outside of the medical industry to help people? Are we starting to break free from systems that have held us back and suppressed us for years? And this one tiny loss, is that a vehicle for us to break free in so many other ways and to come together in so many other ways? I wouldn't be so quick to say that it's all bad. And so, anyway, I think that spirituality has then become more popular because people have had to see the lies and the truths within themselves. And that's what spirituality is all about. It's not about having psychic gifts. It's not about being the best intuitive in the world or the best healer in the world. None of that stuff matters if you can't utilize it for your own growth.
Mm.
And that's what psychic training is for. It's not to have abilities, it's to be able to see your world around you so it can be a teacher for you. So every single thing can be a lesson. So everything can be the guru, the teacher. And so you can discover those parts of yourself that you would have no way of seeing otherwise, if all you're doing is thinking about it or trying to uncover it in your own, or if beings are just telling you the answers, or
Hmm.
you're looking at somebody else with no way of using that as a mirror, then it's not really going to do anything. um, so I think that the popularity of spirituality is good in a sense, because it's attracting more people to feel like they can step into it, like it's not so taboo. A lot of people won't ever take that step for themselves if they feel it's going to make them be more alone and disconnected from society.
Yeah.
My fear with it is that people who don't have the full picture uh, are gonna burn the method for people. Someone who's really good at business and marketing and showing themselves online isn't necessarily a good teacher.
Mm.
And if somebody comes in and has a bad experience with them or gets steered down the wrong road, that's still a level of learning. My only fear would be is if that person then gives up, if they burn that method, and so they're like, oh, intuitive work as a whole is bad because I had one bad teacher, or readings as a whole are not worth it because I had one bad reading. So I worry a little bit about that, because like many things, it's not regulated, and it's just, you get
The
drawn to who you
free
get
for
drawn
all.
to, and
Yeah.
that's your experience. But that's kind of part of the beauty of it too, is that there's no competition in spirit, and there's no competition in this industry, because the person who's attracted to be my client might be different than the person who's attracted to be your client.
Yeah.
And our vibration and where we're at in our own process is going to attract people that are ready for that and that want that. And so those people that are finding the wrong person and having a, maybe what I would want to consider a lesser experience, maybe that's exactly the experience they need for where they're at. And they'll continue to progress and kind of keep going. So my hope would just be that people uh, keep the teachings and throw out the teacher. If you got a bad teacher, throw it out, but keep the teachings if they're good. And even with the stuff I teach, it's all about the tools and what's being taught. It has nothing to do with me or with you or with anyone else. It's what you actually get for it. How much can you integrate it and use it within your life? That's the important part.
Mm. Yeah. I feel like that was so magical. I love that. Yeah, with the Roe versus Wade stuff, I explained it the other day. I was like, listen, like, when things come out and we backslide as a collective, it's not really a back. There's always a forward momentum happening. Like, to believe that we have this sense of like control, like over cosmic energy forces that are just intelligent. It often humbles me where I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, this is hurting people, but it's also causing a lot of us to look as women at our womb spaces and be able to own that space for ourselves. And that's what I want to teach women. Um, yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely coming back to at least my own experience of feeling like some of my mentors in the past, like really like having a chip on my shoulder about it. Like, this is really a beautiful conversation to help me clear some of that. Um, that's what I see in a lot of my friends who are in spiritual spaces. Is like, yeah, I've spent 4K on this program, and it's it's not teaching me how to develop in my own way. And so I would just say to anyone listening, like, yeah, it's okay to kick your teachers off the pedestal. We're all human beings, even channels, even psychics, even whatever it is, even people with abilities. Nobody has your answers, you do. And it took me a really long time because I had been, I wouldn't even say burned. I have so much awareness around it that I was like, oh, like abandonment wound. Here it is. Let's post some pictures around it from certain coaches in the past for me. An amazing experience if you have the awareness. Not if you don't, that's when you get stuck. But yeah, it took me a lot of my own resilience to move through the resistance to coming back to psychic spaces after being hurt.
Hmm.
That's what, so I think that
Yeah.
fear is valid because it's like, okay, like most people are kind of hanging on a thread even with their openness to coming to the space. And then we create, like, people are creating these systems and these programs, and they're going through, and then they're like, wait, I actually didn't have an experience that felt validating. Um, and then they get burned. They burn out. They're like, nope, I don't want to do that ever again. So that, yeah, like I think that's part of, for me, the growth of like neutral space. Because you can feel a neutral space, you can feel it, your soul can feel it. I did with my own mentor Olivia. I remember she had a like free breathwork class, and I was like so ungrounded and like just being literally, I don't want to use the word attacked. I was in some deep shit. And I was like, hey, is your breath work gonna unground me? Because I don't want to die. And she was like, no, like it's fine. Like, and she held the container, and I was like, oh, okay, great. So it kind of like nursed me back into my spiritual work after feeling like very, very hurt over the way that certain spiritual leaders are holding it. Um, I don't think we
Yeah.
can be everything to everyone. That's like the culture that I think is happening right now, is like, I'm one person and I have all your answers. It's very guru culture. But it's like we can't always attune to everyone's needs when we hold spaces. I don't think that's the responsibility of one human being. But we can teach people how to like get neutral to their own experience, which is what energy matters does. So it's like, okay, like naturally when you're vibrating in these spaces, like your pain is going to come up. It is. It's what's going to happen. So you might, I mean, I think there's been moments where I felt like fucking visceral anger because I'm like, but it's mine. Like it's mine that I need to move through. And I think teaching our clients, like, yeah, we don't need to project that onto the people who are holding neutral space for us, because like teaching them how to clear that is the way forward.
Yeah. Self
Um,
responsibility is where you have
yes.
that self empowerment as well.
Yes, definitely, definitely, yes. So I see it kind of both ways. Like we can't put our teachers on pedestals. We have to have self-responsibility, and also teachers need to be aware of creating neutral spaces. And I think that that's kind of the collective growth right now. And then there's of course going to be people who just don't give a shit, and they're aligned with making money. And
Yeah.
I don't know if like spirituality is not about that. I mean, it's beautiful. I want everyone to have happiness to be millionaires. Like, that's gorgeous. I want your needs to be supported. I want you to have a fun life. I want you to experience all the things. Um, but I want at least my clients to do that in a way that feels grounded and ethical and responsible and aligned with like their soul's love. I just don't.
Yeah. What's the point of having everything if it's in a way that creates you more karma and you just have to keep coming back and coming back to get through all those desires and all that karma that's been created. I think that a good teacher is someone who sees themselves as the biggest student in the room. Just like when you're giving a reading, the point is for that space to be for you, to have reflection from that person for your own growth. Same for when you're teaching. You're teaching, and so that whole room of people that you're teaching to is a reflection, a mirror for you and your blind spots, and you get to be the biggest student. You get to learn from them, and they don't need a guru. They don't need this pedestal. If you look at gurus, and I've had some amazing experiences with them, but they have like what, one or two successors that are deemed having been enlightened from them. Whereas, you look at teachers like in psychic institutes where half the people that came out of that program are now doing it themselves professionally or have their own school, or that it's just obvious that they've embodied it and that they haven't latched onto this teacher and tried to just get high off this guru's energy and have them take them to this higher place, which is helpful in its own way and for people at a certain spot in their journey. I'm not knocking it at all, but I don't think that the majority of us need to be that person.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's always fun to get a little crown guru energy, you know? It's always a little fun. Yeah, I think something that you said that's really important is like, are you actually embodying it? I think a good teacher has students who are embodying it and they're doing it in a grounded way. Um, yeah, instead of just like, here's the cut, like figure it out. It's very important to integrate it and to embody it and to do this work yourself. I think I've been like, that's such a growth for me. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I gotta dedicate myself to this. And I always want to make sure that I'm teaching from a place of like embodiment. Like this is what I do. It's not like, oh, I did this one thing one time and now I'm gonna teach it.
Yeah. And that's why it's such a hard industry to be in, because if you're really helping someone, whether it's through a one-on-one session or a class, you're empowering them to not need you. And so it's not creating this cycle, this loop of them needing to come to you for their healing or for their answers or anything else, because they're being empowered and they get to leave the nest and fly off on their own. So it's a little bit tricky when you're genuinely helping somebody to make a ton of money off of it, because you want to make it accessible to people who really need it, and you're empowering them so they don't need you. And that's kind of the beauty of it, because then it becomes a teaching for you. Can you be unattached? Can you do something not from a place of what am I getting from it? I'm teaching because that's part of my growth. That's what my soul needs to do next. There's not this trying to grab at something or get something out of it, whether it's attention, whether it's followers, whether it's fame, money. No, you're just doing it because you do it. And so real spiritual teachers, some of the best ones, have some of the smallest followings and smallest communities, and they're doing a really amazing job.
Yeah, and that's why I want to create this network here, conscious connection, because these are the people who I've worked with who have helped my soul grow and have put me in a place of mm, having my own tools. And I think that we need to create more platforms for healers, mentors, leaders who are coming from that heart-centered place of like, okay, this is what, like, this is the next step for me, like teaching everything that I've learned, that I've embodied. And so I'm really grateful. I am in a lot of gratitude for the amount of support that I have, and I want that for everyone else. I don't want anyone to have to go through like a little bout of psychosis because they don't know how to say hello to the entities that are throwing energy in their space.
Right.
Um, I don't want people to have to feel fear, though it will come up, and it's a beautiful growth to be able to sit through that and own yourself and choose yourself. But I don't want that to be the process. I want people to be able to move through it with a lot more ease than I did. Please, for the love of all things, just a lot more ease. Like, because it can be easy.
Yes.
It really can. It really,
Yeah.
really can. And I made it harder for myself.
Yeah. Just got to learn to get out of our own ways. And that's the thing. It's like, it, you know, we're talking about it in the sense of kind of something more drastic, like somebody passing, a big awakening, entities coming in. But everyone's a spiritual being. Everybody needs spiritual work because we're all spiritual beings, and it's not just for abilities and for entities. It's going to make you better at your career. It's going to make you better with your kids, better with your family. It's going to help you in every aspect of your life. Not only are there classes and tools for every aspect of your life, but it's bringing that consciousness into all of those different aspects and having a way to be aware of what you're doing and not just living based off of the conditioning and blindness that we have from the world. It's like, can you actually be aware of your actions, your thoughts, your emotions? Are they really yours? Who's really wanting these things in your life? It's full spectrum. Like anybody benefits from this. Everybody needs it. It should be something that everybody's going to. You know, it's like, okay, so therapy, people think they need to go to a therapist if they have something hard that happens. Well, a spiritual counselor or mentor is there for all aspects of life, you know, even when you're having your best moments, your highest moments, and everything is great. It's like, okay, how do you not, how do you make that even better? And how do you not be attached to that so there's not a come down? You know, there's always something that that can be
Yep.
enhanced. Yeah.
Yeah, truly. Um, yeah, I definitely feel like the idea of therapy, I don't, it was just really, really validating for me as a spiritual being to work with other spiritual beings. It was a growth for me, and I'm so like grateful for it because yeah, therapy just didn't work. And I often have that story. I'm like, oh, should I just go to therapy? I'm like, no.
Mm.
Just sit in your run your energy. What are you doing? Like, you
It's
don't need a therapist for this.
Yeah, it'd be a lot more expensive too. Like,
Oh,
one thing that I love referring back to is when Tony Robbins says that 90% of someone's success is psychologically based. There's some sort of false belief or psychological thing that's holding them back from being able to take their next step. And it's like, okay, well, how do you actually work with that then? How do you identify what that psychological thing is that's holding you back and how do you release it? Sure, you can spend $200 a session with a therapist and go 5 times and work on 1% of that, or you can learn the tools to be self-aware, and as those things come up in real time that are holding you back, you can become aware of it and then know how to clear it and move through it, and then you get to be that person for yourself in all of your life, and you don't have to get stuck, you don't have to get derailed. You got to just keep going. It gets to be more smooth.
yes. 100%. That's like the journey that I'm on right now. It's like the growth of like we don't want, I think, as mentors, as people who are on the spiritual path, whatever label you want to say, is like we want to create really healthy interdependence of like, I call Brandon up and I'm like, Brandon, I'm really sick right now and I need some support because I can't see it. Versus like, Brandon, do everything for me, heal me. That's not what we want. We want to create like the tools of like, Brandon's like, here's this sponge tool, use this tool, I use that tool all the time now, and I'm like,
I totally agree that it's a beautiful balance because uh, I did a trade with a friend of mine who's an amazing teacher, psychic healer, uh, and I hadn't really received in a long time. I'm used to always giving, and so receiving a 30-minute session from her, I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. You know, I'm used to doing this for other people, but to receive it for myself, I'm like, oh. I was in all these thoughts, emotions, feelings, things that were just digging me into a hole so unneededly, and she just pulled me right out, plopped me back on my feet, and then having those tools, that education and integration to then go with that and take that into my life and keep going was really helpful. One of the reasons I teach is because I'll read people and will identify all these different things that are going on with them. And maybe we'll have time to heal one or two in a session, but they're like, oh, well, how do I work on that? How do I deal with that? And I even, went to these, multiple $1,000 coaching programs to see like, oh, is that more helpful than what I'm doing? And I noticed, I was like, oh no, that's not even close to what I'm doing with people, so I should just be teaching them what I do. And so I have this, class format where people can come and learn the tools for themselves, where they can get coached, where they can take the information they got from a session and then have a tool to work on it for themselves. So I find that really empowering. And some people, they do just want you to do onto them. They don't want to have to take too much responsibility or put in too much effort. And that can get them to a certain point. It can be really helpful, especially if you're in a big rut. But at some point, those people want to be able to do it for themselves a little bit more. And then after they learn to do it from themselves and realize how life-changing it is, then eventually they get to a point where they want to be able to do it for others because they
Mm.
see the beauty in that, and so on and so forth. And then they become a teacher. So
Yeah.
that's how I see the cycle of it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, I'm like seeing it now. It's like if someone else is watering your rose, like you're gonna benefit from that, but like you're gonna want to like get your watering tank out and start to take some self responsibility and learn for yourself, um, so that you can create like you can find your own answer. So you're not spinning out every time the world brings you a new decision to make, so that you can really feel grounded on your journey. And then when you receive a reading or a healing externally, oh my cat, hi. Hello. Then you are receiving it from like such a different place. Um yeah, I'm very fortunate to receive a lot of healings and readings and all the fun things, but you know, there comes a point when you have to do it for yourself. And there's a moment of always resistance for me. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it. And I'm like, all right, come
Hmm.
on.
That's interesting. I've always fallen the opposite way where somebody will offer something and I'll be like, I just want to know how to do it. Like, even if I'm having like aches and pains in my body and someone's like, I'm a great rolfer and I'm going to fix that for you. I'm like, I want to know how to do it.
Yes, but
It's like
like
so unnecessary.
I was talking on the first episode of this podcast about the reason why I had so many psychic readings and healings was because I was actually reading the energy so that I could understand how to do it. And I
Yeah.
was like, instead of doing that, thousands of dollars, just go to a psychic training program, Alex. Like, come on. Like what the um yeah, oh my god. I want to know everything. Someone like
Yeah.
acupressured me there. I'm like, tell me more. Like I need to know more so I can do this to me. Um but we do tend to, you know, as people, as human beings, get stuck sometimes, and it's really nice to have someone who can see when
Oh, yeah.
there's a lot of fog in your space or a lot of energy. And
Yes.
yeah, I find that the most effective way to work with me is, yeah, just like a 2 hour session. We'll just get it out.
That's
That's
awesome.
it. Let's go. Um, but yeah, so what is a reading like with you? Like what, like when you're doing, okay, if I'm just like a random person and I'm like, what is energy work, Brandon? Like what is it? What are you doing in session? How do you
Mm.
explain that in like kindergarten terms for someone who's like, what are they talking about? Entities and
Yeah, I have a method that I use to see where someone's at in their growth, what they can hear and have and understand for themselves, and what's going to be too much. And so, some very first time clients, I'm just looking at the energy of who they are as a soul, giving them a spirit to spirit hello, maybe telling them a little bit about their past lives, a little bit about how they communicate, a little bit about how they relate to the world, some of the energy of what they wanted to achieve in this life, some things that before they came in and were born that they uh, wanted to put in their life's path for them. So, and that can give them a framework for why they're having certain experiences. You know, is there a certain karmic connection to a certain person in their family? Was there a big lesson that they wanted to learn or something they're overcoming from a past life? And it can give them a perspective as to why things are happening, what's going on for them, so they can have more understanding uh, to be able to move forward in their life. And so I'll look at some of that. I'll look at what's just moving around for them in present time. You know, if there's, you know, an argument that's lingering around them that they're holding on to, if there's some unconsciousness that's coming through and kicking them out of their body, whatever it is. Uh,
are you reading my energy right now?
and yeah, so I won't use terminology that would frighten them or scare them. If I'm seeing an entity in their space, I might just describe it as there's an energy and here's how it's affecting you, because everybody knows how something feels to them, whether
Mm-hmm.
they believe in the psychic story behind it or not. They might not even believe in a past life, but you say, here's an energy that's affecting you in this way. In this past life, you had this duck that you really loved and you weren't able to take it with you when you moved. And so you always wanted another duck. And they're like, oh my God, I do want a duck. I'm obsessed with ducks. Whatever it is, super random example, but they know how they're experiencing it. So you can relate it back to them in that way.
I have a question for you. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Because I want to kindergarten this up. What do you think when we talk about karma? I'm always curious about this. We're creating a sense of karma based on our actions and what we're doing, right? I'm like, tell me about karma.
So karma is ultimately desire, right?
Okay.
So if you have a desire in one life to, be successful at something, and like, let's just say you want to be a successful violinist, and that is your heart's utmost desire, and that's where a lot of your focus is, and then you die having not completed that in that life, you could call that a level of karma, where then in the next life, maybe that's something that you're still trying to fulfill. And maybe you're unconscious to it in the next life. And so there's this sense of needing to do something, but you don't know what it is that you need to do. Or maybe you do still feel like you need to be a violinist, but it's not really what's part of your soul's path. It's just that karma that's carried over. And then there's the level of karma that they talk about is right action. And so are you in a state where you are not feeding energy into lies? You're feeding energy into the truth of who you really are. And so the words you're speaking, the actions you're taking, they're not coming from a place of needing something else, of not being attached to something else, of trying to grab at it, have it. It's just emanating from your beingness. And so it's kind of a clean action. There's not something wrong that's in it. And so people oftentimes will think of karma as like an eye for an eye. I kill you, and so you're going to kill me. But it's not always reciprocated to the same level as which it was first happening. It could be I killed you, and so you're gonna break up with me and leave me on the streets homeless, kicking me out of the place that we're living in together, type of thing. I'm just making up a story.
I love it. I love it. I'm like, I always make jokes because I think we people, we take things so seriously. Like, everyone listening, you've probably killed someone in a past life. So just calm down.
Sure.
I always
a lot
like
of my students I've killed in a past life.
Have you killed me, Brenton? You're like, yes. The answer is yes. You're like
Can't say
you're
that
like,
online.
don't.
Just kidding.
Oh my God. Well, I think about this way. As I think it's just hilarious. It's like, okay, like, calm down, everyone. The morality police. You're fine. I tell my roommate all the time, I'm like, I've definitely killed you. Definitely. And she's like, definitely have killed you. And I'm like, cool. Let's not do that in this life, but like, what a fun ride. Like, great. I love that you've killed a lot of your students, Brandon. That lands. That lands.
Yeah, I had a really horrible past life where I was like pretty manipulative to people and used my abilities in not so nice ways. And so part of my path this lifetime is teaching people and teaching them how to have their own power and their own abilities to make up for some of that past life that I had. So it's interesting. People think of karma as bad usually, and that it's some outside force doing it onto yourself. But if I look at it, me as a soul, having done my past life review, was like, yep, I fucked that one up really bad. I got super attached to the power and just wanted the, most energy coursing through my body possible, and just wanted to feel super safe and in control of everything. So let's go back and teach people these psychic tools. And that's not a bad thing, right?
No.
I quite enjoy doing that. It's quite fun, but it's to make up for this karma that's, quote unquote bad.
Yeah, or just like has negatively affected people or created impact in a way that you decided as a soul was not in resonance with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
A lot of times I see it as something that when you're in that past life review, you're feeling the emotions, thoughts, the whole picture of what somebody else felt in response to an action that you did. And it's not so much some outside God forcing you to go and repent and make up for something. It's more you being outside of your ego and the soul part of you, reviewing your past life and seeing, oh yeah, that didn't feel good at all. Let's make a change there. Let's shift that.
Do you feel like we always incarnate on earth to rebalance that karma? Is it something that's held within the frequency of this dimension?
Certain karmas are played out on certain energy fields or certain levels of the astral that are not on Earth.
Mm.
Um, so you can clear through karma whether you're incarnating on Earth or not. For a lot of beings, they don't know how to do that outside of having a body and having a life experience. That's why learning the tool of how to clear karma energetically and how to explode mental images uh, is really important, because that's a tool you can take with you on the other side as well. But your question is more, is coming back and incarnating always a karmic thing? Uh, I I don't know that I would describe it exactly as that, but there's usually some level of a desire that we're coming back for, something that we wanted to continue learning or doing, uh, something that we were addicted to or attached to, that we're coming back for. So it's, do you have all of your spiritual capabilities, all of your information, and
Mm.
can you take that with you when you die and utilize that on the other side? No? Okay, then you're probably going to want to come back. Uh,
Oh.
or yes, okay, maybe it's time to go on. But I've definitely read people where they had a few hundred human incarnations and then they popped off to a different planet. They took a break, went somewhere else, and then they came back later on.
I
It's
like we'll
not
get that
like you're
soon.
forced into it. Yeah, there is some choice involved.
So why do you feel like I'm always curious about this? Because I'm like I'm like, not contemplating. I'm gonna read my own energy of why I incarnated here, which I feel like I know. Balance. Anyway, why do you feel like you came back into the body, Brandon? What were you doing?
Well, uh, I wanted to come back to be able to master my abilities in the sense of being able to express them and share them with everyone else. And I wanted to be able to have them at all the different levels of energy. So have them at a physical level, having them all the way to the highest astral levels, so I can take those abilities anywhere with me, and still have them and not have to, another way to say that is not have to sit in a cave in order to feel enlightened or to feel at peace, to be able to
Sure.
have those abilities in the day-to-day world. Could do a reading on a city bus, could,
Mm.
clear energy no matter where I am, that sort of thing. But part of it was, there was definitely some karma to clear and some pain to heal. I was murdered in a war in one of my lifetimes, where I had jumped out of a plane, parachuted down, and was kind of running on foot as a foot soldier, and had got like bayoneted through the stomach and killed. And there was some uh, karma with that, where I had left what was my wife at that time with the kids, and had felt remorse about leaving her with those kids. And so there was some karma there with that, as well as some of those other past lives where I had gone off track. It was interesting because you think of spiritual progression and incarnation as you start off as this little baby soul, you're totally clueless, just exploring, experiencing anything. You get a little bit older as a soul and you maybe become more of an activist, trying to get things done in the world, trying to change everything. Then you get to be an older soul and you're kind of riding the waves of the dichotomies and focus more on your own growth. And people think of it as like, oh, okay, I'm going to be more enlightened each lifetime. For me, it wasn't the case. I had got to this point where I had done a lot of spiritual work, had several lifetimes where I was studying with really amazing teachers and really owning my abilities, and it just super profound spiritual lives. And then I screwed up and had this really sort of dark life where I was really manipulative and power hungry and abusive in a lot of ways. And then I had a bunch of sort of normal incarnations after that, as that kind of,
As a
trickled out.
buffer, it was like farm life for you.
Yeah, yeah. There was farm life. There was some weird ones. And then I was able to start to trust myself more and more, to come into more awareness and more power and be able
Yeah.
to manage that and not abuse it or go off track with it. So it's not always linear.
I
Um,
feel that so
yeah, kind of
deeply.
like our society's progression isn't linear, like we were talking about. Healing is never linear. Same with our soul's growth. Sometimes we're jumping all over the place
Mm,
with it.
yeah, I like that. I can imagine being like, oop, started a cult. Let's come back as a farmer to just chill it out until.
Yeah, yeah. But I will say, on the contrary, in this lifetime, in a body, spirituality is oftentimes a build-up and breakthrough process, whether it be the enlightenment intensive I went to, where we did one specific practice for 7 days straight, and you build up until you have this profound breakthrough, but also in the day-to-day stuff you do. Every time you run your energy, you're clearing stuff out of there, you're doing your meditation, you're being mindful, you're progressing, you're kind of getting higher and higher with it. And sometimes the unfortunate thing is it moves slowly enough that you don't realize where you started. And so you're living in this state that's so much better than where you'd ever been before, but you don't really remember the work you've done. And so you kind of fall off and you get into old bad habits, or you give up on your practice. And sooner or later, you dig yourself into a hole and you're like, holy crap, am I ever going to make it back to where I was? I shouldn't have fallen off track.
Yeah.
So, one of my biggest pieces of advice that I guess I wish I gave myself too was to just stick. Well, I stuck with it and was steady, but I fell off while sticking with it. And that happens. That's part of our growth sometimes. But being consistent, consistency is just super huge in this work.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a level of discipline that I've been learning. And for me, like discipline is yeah, that choice to come back to something. We're always going to be kind of flowing, but it's like to come back to it, to come back to it, to come back to it. Um, and that's been a huge growth for me this year. I'm so happy about that because I've definitely can get distracted. Distracted is a word that I'll use. Um, but yeah, I think it's weird because I love being in the body, and I also am like, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's a fun time. But it's also it's a very cool experience. It's a very cool experience to be incarnated in a body doing this work, especially in 2022.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, I'm not getting burned at the stake right now, Brandon. This is great.
Mm-hmm.
This is incredible. Like, this is cool. This is an important time in evolution to be incarnated on this planet. Yay. Which is why if we go back to the spirituality, like why yeah, there's a lot of like shame and pain that's kind of clearing from being able to like own our sensitivity. Um, which is great. And things can be distracting or go off track or whatever, and whatever that looks like. So, yeah, use your discernment, but also realize that some of the time we get stuck on our own pain. Um, the world tries to say, oh, like, trust your gut. Like, that's kind of the frame right now. Trust your gut. I have
Mm.
thoughts and feelings about that. But it's also like a lot of people have a lot of trauma and a lot of pain and a lot of mental energy keeping them from making that decision or moving forward. And that's the most perfect time to see a psychic or a healer when you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, right? Like, it's like moving through just that level of resistance, like, will get you unstuck. And sometimes we'll feel that resistance before we go and see someone who's going to help us get unstuck.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, when my clients are like, I have to cancel today, I'm like, do you? I'm
Yeah.
like, are you sure? Because I'm assuming a lot of resistance is coming up for you. Um, and I have resistance to a lot of things, especially things that are going to, yeah, like kind of quantum leap me, evolve me in a way, or where I'm going to have to look at my own pain.
Oh, yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, you take a step up in your consciousness, and all that pain and invalidation and everything else that's buried in there comes to the surface, and you detox it out. And so we associate that pain, resistance, all those seemingly negative feelings with the session that's about to happen or the information we're about to learn. And sometimes it makes it really hard to get there and show up. But then once you do, that's how it all clears out. And as long as you're not holding on to it, then it can clear out fairly easily and you can feel a whole lot better after. If you're so used to carrying that story and that pain, then you might identify with it as it's leaving and you may have a couple days of feeling kind of down and bad afterwards, and then it clears and you
Mm-hmm.
come through the mud and can see clearly again. It's yeah, it's an interesting process. People think of healings as supposed to always be something that feels good, but if you're truly healing, sometimes it's more like a detox. Sometimes you're pulling some gunk out and there's a big reaction that that body has to kind of catch up to the spiritual healing that happened.
Yeah, I went to your trance healing, and the next day I was like, oh, body growth. I was like, here it is. Yay. I was like, I need to rest. Yeah, it definitely feels like, yeah, your body needs some time and space to catch up. So yeah, if you've ever had a healing and you're like, oh, I feel worse, give it a couple days. Let your body catch up. Um, yeah, you'll be okay.
I felt that way after channeling too,
Yeah.
admittedly. Buddha was a big lesson or a big energy to bring through my body. And
Mhm.
yeah, there was definitely a couple days of like, whoa, what just happened as it was all integrating through my dreams and through my awareness, trickling down, pushing stuff out, triggering past lives, all sorts of stuff going on. It was just like, whoa, massive. But then as you come through it, it's like, oh, okay, I now feel like I have integrated the lessons that he was bringing forth and can actually even use it for my life to have a greater sense of peace. And some of the things that I was putting a lot of, I guess, unnecessary clinginess onto, whether we want to call that greed or fear or whatever it was, started to melt away. And I'm like, oh, thank you, Buddha. Now we're getting to the
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah. Me and the Buddha. He's hanging out. He's like,
Yeah. I'm gonna channel an angel next time, something a little
please,
more gentle for the group.
please.
Uh,
Oh my God. Incredible. Anyway, what we're talking about is Brandon has a twice a month trance healing as part of a really accessible way to like start healing. I don't know. Okay, but like here's my thoughts on this. Is trance healing great for somebody who's in a beginner state, or what would you say like is how do you create that container?
yeah. Ever since the 80s, they've been doing trance healings where they brought in people from the public to receive those healings, where they'd have a line of trance mediums uh, healing one person, so 3 on 1. And people off the streets, the very newest beginners, would come in and receive that healing. The way that I do it is a little bit different. It does attract people that are a little bit more accustomed to spirituality and uh, yeah, or maybe further on their path. But you definitely don't have to be. It can definitely be something that's open to anyone because there's nothing you really have to do other than sit there and receive and come with a level of willingness. And we're just doing a gentle opening meditation, and then you're just receiving this healing. So I try to keep it in a kindergarten enough space, meaning it's very open to everyone. You're not going to feel out of place or like there's something you need to know to be there or anything like that. It may be a stretch as far as it's something you've never experienced before. Some people say that they feel really high afterwards, like everything was just washed out of them. Yeah, I've had a lot of that where people are like, I was just floating for 3 hours afterwards. So it may be an experience that's a lot. Um, if you haven't ever had a healing of that quality before.
I love it. It's like one of my favorite pastimes. I'm like, oh, trance healing? Yes, absolutely, 100%. Let me get out of my body for a minute. I will say for me and my perspective, a lot of human beings aren't grounded, and so having a certain level of tools to get yourself kind of grounded after is supportive for sure. But yeah, it is very kindergarten and it feels really nice. So if you're interested in that, Brandon does a trance healing. You give people a month for free.
I do. Yeah.
Go and experience it. I'm like, everyone should do a trance healing. How fun would that be? What if
Yeah.
the whole collective was like, we're going to Brandon's trance on Friday?
The more people, the more powerful that healing can be in some ways, because we have so many people that are stepping up in their vibration, and there's this collective consciousness of people that are there to get a healing that makes it just really uh, powerful. Right now, it's kind of a smaller, close knit group, which has its own beauty and funness to it, its own level of intimacy. But yeah, the more people, really, the more healing that comes forth. So.
We're going to make that happen on this
Yeah.
podcast alone. Is there anything else you want to share? Like anything else that we haven't covered? Like I know I could talk to you for the rest of the day. I have so
Yeah.
many questions, but like what else do you feel like needs to be shared or
Um, I guess the only other thing I wanted to say to add another